What is success? By the end of this video, it'll become clear that success means vastly different things to different people. Although we might believe that we want pretty much the same thing that other people want, money, fame, power. Outside of the basics like food, shelter, and security, the things that will actually make each individual happy vary quite a bit. Ex-NFL quarterback Jake Locker demonstrated this when he walked away from his and so many others' childhood dream of being an NFL quarterback. He even went so far as to make his agent promise to never tell him of any deals that teams may have put on the table. His decision to walk away from the game confused many. It caused a whole lot of people to make statements that started with, "Man, if that was me." And it just generally raised a lot of questions. In this video, we're gonna attempt to answer those questions. This is what happened to Jake Locker. Cue the Wayne. Jake Locker grew up in Ferndale, Washington. He grew up in a tight-knit family that stressed hard work. His dad would tell him repeatedly, whatever you do it to the best of your ability and you leave it better than you found it. That's exactly what Jake would do at Ferndale High School. Jake was the first freshman to start at Ferndale in 21 years. It was pretty much understood that freshmen just didn't start at Ferndale. But Jake, he broke the mold. And not only did he start at quarterback, he also started on defense playing cornerback. Jake was a great athlete. He was even drafted by the LA Angels of Anaheim to play baseball. But obviously, he chose to go the football route. At that time in Jake's life, he was just in love with the game. The leave everything better than you found it mantra pushed by Jake's dad never rang more true than during Jake's senior season in 2005. Jake threw for 1,600 yards and rushed for 1,300. He threw 25 touchdowns and only 3 picks. He rushed for another 24 touchdowns on the ground, giving him a total of nearly 3,000 all-purpose yards with 49 touchdowns. Jake was named 3A Washington Player of the Year, and he led Ferndale to an undefeated season and a state championship. He showed up big in the championship game too, 272 yards with 4 touchdowns, leading his team to a blowout victory in the state championship game. Now that 2005 season remains till this day Ferndale's only state championship and their only undefeated season.
To this day!
Jake committed to the University of Washington, and as 3A Player of the Year and a hometown kid, Jake was seen as a hero. The people of Washington nicknamed him Mutt Lake Jake and even weirdly put his name into Bible verses, rocking t-shirts that said things like Jake 316. Jake of course saw no profits from these t-shirts, but that's neither here nor there. Jake came in with a ton of hype and was expected to basically be the savior of the program. And while football felt natural to Jake on the field, the pressures of being the star quarterback off the field over time would really weigh on Jake. After redshirting in 2006, Jake took the starting job as a redshirt freshman in 2007. Washington actually went 4-9, winning 1 less game than they did the year before. Jake threw for just over 2,000 yards and rushed for just under 1,000. He accounted for a total of 29 touchdowns, but he still threw more interceptions than he threw touchdowns. He also only completed 47% of his passes, which obviously isn't very good. He was raw. He would need to get that completion number up and those turnovers down if he ever hoped to accomplish anything at the University of Washington. Nonetheless, Jake has shown off his potential, and along with that potential, maybe even surpassing that potential, was an unbelievable toughness. On November 10th, 2007, playing in a game versus Oregon State, Jake had to be carted off the field as he sustained one of the scariest injuries that you can sustain during a game of football, a neck injury. So he's carted off the field and taken to the local hospital. But before the game was over, Jake was back in the stadium rocking a neck brace and cheering his team on. They went on to lose, but still, my man showed back up. With that injury, Jake missed a grand total of 1 game. All right, he missed 1 game and bam, he was back. He finished the rest of the season like a G. Jake continued to play a little bit of baseball during the offseason, just a guy who loved to compete and wanted to stay active. For Jake, playing baseball was also a little bit of an escape. Since he hadn't chose to seriously pursue baseball, it was kind of a safe haven for him, getting away from the pressures of football. But while a change in sports allowed Jake's mind to rest, it didn't allow his body to rest. And when your body tells you to rest and you ignore it, it has ways of getting your attention. So going into the 2008 football season, Jake tore his hamstring during football practice. Fortunately, he was back for game 1. Was he 100% though? Probably not. Even if he was, he missed valuable reps leading up to the season. With that being said, no way to sugarcoat it, Jake played horribly through the first 3 games of the year. Imagine your starting quarterback attempting 84 passes, and on those 84 attempts, throwing 1 touchdown. That's not gonna cut it. That was the reality for Jake Locker starting the 2008 season. Now, he did rush for a few touchdowns, but it wasn't enough to lead Washington to even 1 victory. In week 4, an already hobbled Jake broke his thumb, and that ended Jake's season. He was done. The Huskies would go on to not win 1 single game the entire 2008 season, 0-12, goose egg in the win column. Needless to say, the coach was fired, and in came Steve Sarkisian. It was his turn to see if he could turn this thing around. A highly touted offensive coordinator who had coached Heisman winners Carson Palmer and Matt Leinart at USC, had worked in the NFL, had a ton of cachet and a ton of intelligence when it came to getting it done on the offensive end. This man would surely help a young Jake Locker. This, as expected, led to a better year for the Huskies. Jake had the best season of his career from a statistical standpoint. 2,800 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, and only 11 picks. This was the first year where his touchdown and interception ratio wasn't basically even. He also rushed for about 400 yards and scored 7 TDs on the ground. After losing a close game to LSU in week 1 and extending what was the nation's longest losing streak at 15, Washington finally got his first dub in what seemed like forever. Week 2 of the 2009 season, they beat, drumroll, Idaho. Not all that impressive, but they did break the streak, and the very next week, they upset the number 3 team in the nation, USC, a game that they were clearly supposed to lose. Now, with that being Sarkisian's old stomping grounds, I'm sure that's the reason that the team had a leg up. But regardless, what an unbelievable victory for Jake Locker and his lowly Washington team, who just went 0-12 the year before to beat the number 3 team in the nation. I mean, unbelievable. In that game, Jake threw for 237 yards and he scored a touchdown. And along with his new coach, Jake would lead the Washington Huskies to a much better year, going 5-7. Still, Jake had never had a winning season in college. And like his dad always told him, he wanted to leave Washington better than it was when he got there. Well, guess what? The year before he got there, they went 5-7. So that wasn't gonna cut it. For that reason, Jake decided to come back for his senior year. Now, I know that based on his record and his numbers, you may think that Jake wasn't that highly touted anyway. You would be wrong. Jake has size, athleticism, and a rocket arm, and this shot him toward the top of the list for NFL quarterback prospect. We've seen this recently with a player like Josh Allen. Didn't really win a lot in college, didn't have great numbers, but he had great size, great athleticism, and a great arm. Literally the same, you know what I'm saying? And based on those 3 things that you can't teach, and then adding in Jake's leadership ability, some scouts were saying that he might go number 1 in the 2010 NFL draft. But Jake decided to stay in school for his senior year. Now, I think there's a couple of reasons for this. Number 1, like we talked about, his dad always wanted him to leave things better than he found them. Once you start, finish it, he had another year. He decided to come back and do that. That was a part of his core values. Also, we've talked about the pressure that Jake has felt just being the hometown hero. So imagine being the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. That is unbelievable pressure. You know what? I think I'm gonna stick around here for one more year. But here's the thing. The NFL had already announced that after that 2010 season, they were gonna be going to the rookie wage scale. Most of you guys should remember before 2011, first round rookies used to get paid obscene amount. I mean, they still get paid a lot of money, but it used to be crazy. For example, in 2010, the first year that Jake could have gone pro and was projected to go number 1 or at least top 3, Sam Bradford went number 1 and he got paid $50 million guaranteed. The next year in 2011, Cam Newton went number 1. He got paid $22 million guaranteed. So a $30 million drop off from 2010 to 2011 based on the rookie wage scale. Jake made the decision to stay in college knowing that. Man. So as you can see, Jake never really cared that much about money. Now, Washington's last time having an overall winning record was back in 2002. Their last time having a winning record in the Pac-10 was the year before that, 2001. Here it was Jake's senior year, 2010, and he was trying to change all that. Now, the Pac-10 was pretty stacked that year. Check out how many conference teams were ranked in the top 25 that were on Washington's schedule in 2010. USC was ranked number 18. Oregon State number 24, Arizona number 15, Stanford was number 13, and they had to play Oregon, who was the number 1 team in the nation. They also played Nebraska twice, once in the regular season and then in their bowl game. And Nebraska was ranked in the top 25 for both games. This is not a powerhouse school, so having to play all those teams, bro, that is a tough schedule. So just getting a winning record this year was not gonna be easy. Nonetheless, Jake helped lead the team to a 7-6 overall record, finishing 5-4 in the conference. Jake had done it. He'd brought the team their first winning season in 8 years. Now, despite that success on the field, Jake was a late bloomer when it came to drinking, but he had slowly picked up that bad habit to help him deal with the pressures of being Montlake Jake. He started to party so hard that he'd black out on a relatively normal basis. People kept this under wraps, kind of wrote it off as, you know, just a college kid doing his thing, which it kind of is, but we know this type of stuff can go left fast with athletes. But fortunately for Jake, nothing ever really came of it. Even still, I thought it was worth noting. Going into the NFL draft, kind of like we talked about earlier, Jake had some things that you just can't teach. Size, he was 6'3", 230 pounds. Athleticism, at that size and at the quarterback position, he ran a 4.59 40. That's great. And to top it all off, his leadership ability was seen as top notch. The Titans needed to replace Vince Young. That relationship had gone south quickly, and they say that it was largely due to Vince's immaturity. Also, he had this guy as a coach, so that never helps. So the way they saw it, going from Vince Young to Jake Locker was a huge swing of the pendulum. Jake ended up going 8th overall to the Tennessee Titans. And instead of that $50 million that he probably would have gotten the year before, he got $12 million. Still millions, but yeah, it's honestly not really even relevant to the story, but damn, that's a lot of money. After becoming a first round draft pick, Jake's story back at home in Washington, it was basically a Rocky movie at this point. And Jake was struggling more and more with the off the field expectations that come with being Montlake Jake. So he's struggling with that, and then once he got to the NFL, now he's also struggling with the other part of football, actual football on the field. Jake played heavy minutes in about 3 games his rookie season, but he didn't win any of them. He did account for 5 touchdowns and no interceptions, so that's good. The Titans themselves actually finished 9-7, but they didn't make the playoffs. The following season, Jake won the starting job, and he led the team to a 6-10 record. Now, to be fair, Jake only played in 11 games that year as he injured his shoulder and missed the last 5 games of the season. But even still, mediocre numbers for Jake. 2,200 passing yards through 11 games is just 200 yards per game. And I know the league wasn't as wide open back then, but that would still put Jake around the 30th ranked quarterback as far as pass yards per game. And he wasn't setting the league on fire from a rushing standpoint either, only rushing for about 26 yards per game. On top of that, it's not like he was leading the team to a bunch of victories, so there was really not a ton of positives to pull out of there. He threw 10 touchdowns and 11 picks, with his numbers really looking the same as they did early on in his college career. Now the following year, 2013, saw Jake complete 60% of his passes for the first time since high school. Since high school, bro. The first time since high school, he completed 6 out of 10 passes. He also threw for twice as many touchdowns as he threw picks. This sounds great, but there's one issue. He only played 7 games. 3 separate injuries saw to it. He missed 2 games with a knee and hip injury, only to come back and go down again with the foot injury. That foot injury cost him 7 games, so he missed 9 total games in 2013. Unfortunately for Jake, 2014 would bring more of the same, with him never truly having an opportunity to develop because he was so frequently injured. 2014, 7 games again. And these 7 games weren't even good. He threw 5 touchdowns and 7 interceptions in those. A wrist injury followed by a shoulder injury would effectively end Jake's career. But according to Jake, that is not at all why he decided to retire from the game of football. When Jake entered the league, he met veteran quarterback Matt Hasselbeck, whose job he was there to eventually take. But still, Matt took him under his wing and replaced his drinking with religion to help Jake deal with his quote-unquote hero status burden that he had so much trouble dealing with. They went on retreats, met Lecrae, and over time, Jake got deeper and deeper into religion. He began to understand that he was never comfortable being Montlake Jake because he wasn't being authentically himself. He was trying to live up to an image that was placed on him by others. And as he began to think about what he really wanted, he started to question, do I really want to play football? Doing the things it took to be successful in football just didn't seem as important anymore. Staying late at the facility and being obsessed with the details of the game, even still after he got home, Jake felt it took too much away from the time with his family. Real time, where he was actually present in those moments. He had people constantly trying to suppress who he was. They wanted him to dress a certain way, answer interview questions a certain way, be a certain way. In short, Jake felt like a fraud. He had been simply playing a role for all these years. So in the end, the injuries did not directly cause him to retire, but during that time off, he was able to reflect and really think, having some time away from the game. Ultimately, when Jake decided to retire, he had the hardest time telling his dad, do everything to the best of your ability. Leave everything better than you found it. This was ringing in his head. And even though these are great values to have, they had started to really drive Jake into a dark place. But when Jake explained this decision to his dad, who he just knew would be disappointed, his dad was proud. He felt he'd given it his all, and he'd come to a sound decision. And hey, technically, Jake retired after his rookie contract, so he really did finish what he started because the contract was over and he never signed a new contract. He made his agent promise not to tell him about any other offers, and his agent didn't tell him. But he did let slip to the media a little bit later that there were about 10 offers on the table for Jake's services. But Montlake Jake was perfectly content spending time with his family, playing in local softball games, taking out the trash, and living a normal life. He used some of his $12 million NFL dollars to buy a farm. He copped some chickens and he copped some cows. I don't even know if you can cop chickens and cows. I guess you have to purchase them. And that's what made him happy. He says since he retires, people always ask him, how does he keep busy? But even in retirement, Jake's got a ton to keep him busy. Let's see, he's got the farm, he's got the kids, he's got the wife, online seminary school. He volunteers with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. He's a life coach. He co-owns a gym. He likes to hunt in his spare time, and he still works out every morning. That's a full schedule. Say what you want about Jake Locker and his decision to retire from the NFL early, but he's honestly much more successful now. He's financially stable, able to afford everything he wants, take care of his family, and he stopped drinking. He doesn't have a need for it because he's actually happy. The life he's living is the definition of success for Jake Locker. We all have to figure out what the definition of success is for us. And once we do that, we'll probably realize that once you block out the outside noise, it's not impossible to achieve. 1.